Buffalo first appeared in North America almost 200,000 years ago. By the year 1500, there were approximately 60 million of them here. Their big heads and shaggy brown coats made them stand out amongst all other living things. They were very social animals, living together in large groups, led by the older, wiser females. Males, when old enough to fend for themselves, would wander off from their families to live on their own, or join up with groups of other males. The Native Americans, in their wisdom, realized their dependence on the buffalo for survival. Thousands of years passed as the American Indian and the buffalo lived side by side in relative harmony. And for the food, the clothing, the shelter that the buffalo provided, they were held as sacred. But the freedom and prosperity the buffalo enjoyed for so many thousands of years found no respect in the eyes of the invading pioneers of the early United States. They took notice of the Indians' warm, furry buffalo hides and began acquiring them in trade. As the years passed, that trade became more and more lucrative. Eventually, hungry veterans of the Civil War took over the hunt. And as the flow of pioneers expanded westward, like a swarm of locusts, they consumed everything in their path. The hides were fashioned into coats, blankets, and other accessories of city life. The meat, especially the tongues, were consumed as delicacies. By the 1870s, settlers and city folk alike saw killing buffalo as a good way to make money. Luxury outings were offered as the hunt became a sport for the wealthy. Each year, hundreds of thousands of buffalo fell, their hides and tongues sent east on trains and wagons to market. During the year 1870, over 2 million buffalo were killed in the southern plains alone. During the winter of 1872, more than 1.5 million buffalo were killed. And from 1872 to 1874, 5,000 buffalo died each day, every day, each year. The perversion spun into madness as train companies offered tourists the chance to shoot buffalo from the windows of their train cars as they rolled westward. Killing contests were organized across the land. Legendary Buffalo Bill Cody killed more than 4,000, including 48 buffalo in the span of 30 minutes during a contest. Critical to the expansion of the United States into the frontier west was the presence of the United States Army. Soldiers and commanders who had survived the Civil War turned their attention to eradicating the Native Americans and the buffalo. The Army began sponsoring and supplying civilian hunting expeditions. Everything hunters might need was supplied by the government, including guns and ammunition. And to ensure success, top Army marksmen would often be assigned to the parties. With the buffalo exterminated, the Army reasoned, the Native Americans would lose their way of life. They'd starve, and at long last, surrender. So thorough and fast-moving was the slaughter. The last train loaded with hides rolled east in 1884. In 1887, the American Museum of Natural History in New York wanted some buffalo specimens for an exhibit, so they launched an expedition out to Montana. After a prolonged search, they found no buffalo at all. Not one. Even Yellowstone Park hadn't been spared. Poachers had their run of the place. There were no more wild buffalo left to kill, save for 23. 23 of 60 million. A strange sense of regret lingered among some of the public and a few in government. The year was 1900. The destruction would have been complete had it not been for the fact that the 23 surviving wild buffalo had made their stand in the isolated Pelican Valley of Yellowstone Park. With this group to build on, park managers, with the support of the government in Washington, acquired 21 captive buffalo in 1902 from private collectors and began a breeding program at a buffalo ranch created in the park. The decision had been made to bring back the buffalo, at least in Yellowstone, in large part so visitors wouldn't go away disappointed. As the captive buffalo group multiplied at the ranch, select members were chosen to mingle with the survivors and descendants of the 23. To many people, the restoration of Yellowstone Park's wild buffalo population from the brink of extinction was the greatest conservation achievement in the history of humanity. But for the buffalo, the story has no place for celebration. By the time the program was up and running, most of the land the buffalo had lived on, near and far from the park, had been taken over by farmers, ranchers, and other controlling interests. There was to be no going back. Worse yet, the breeding program, by way of either those first captive buffalo acquired or from beef cattle also raised at the ranch, had introduced a disease into the wild Yellowstone population. Though the disease wasn't deadly, it had the potential to affect reproduction in both buffalo and beef cattle. As the breeding program successfully grew, park managers took it upon themselves to set the first of many arbitrary limits on the number of buffalo allowed in the park. The first related decision came in 1908, when it was determined that there were too many males in the population. By 1918, the slaughter of males was a regular occurrence at the Buffalo Ranch. Predictably, it was later determined that there were too many females in the park, so scores of them, with and without their babies, were also slaughtered. The Buffalo Ranch, though, had served its purpose. Yellowstone's buffalo population would ensure that wild buffalo were a part of the American landscape for posterity. The operation was closed down in 1952, but park managers continued to wrestle with what to do with a population of buffalo that wants to grow, wants to roam, but is only given a fixed amount of land to live on. To make matters worse, the buffalo were confronted at every turn by cruel agents of the Montana Department of Livestock, who didn't want their cattle sharing the land with buffalo each time the buffalo migrated out of the park. In 1995, the state of Montana sued the National Park Service for allowing buffalo to leave Yellowstone Park. In 2000, an arrangement between 5 government agencies and several Indian tribes was reached, requiring the park to keep buffalo only on agreed-upon land and to hold the park's population below a fixed number. Along the northern border of the park, in a secluded and well-guarded facility, the Park Service has for years dutifully fulfilled both requirements. As migrating buffalo attempt to leave the park in search of food during the park's harsh winter, they're lured and forced into a series of pens. Families are torn apart, freedom ripped away. It's from these pens that most of the buffalo are loaded onto cattle trailers and transported to a nearby slaughterhouse. An especially cruel end, considering their home was a national park, and they were nearly hunted to extinction only a century ago. Since 1985, 12,575 of Yellowstone Park's iconic wild buffalo have been killed during the annual winter slaughter. As for the disease that drives the Montana Department of Livestock in their dogged attacks on the Yellowstone buffalo. History will record it as the root of yet another tragedy for the buffalo, and the reaction to the disease by cattlemen will be recorded as yet another case of destructive human greed and ignorance. Over the course of more than a century, and to this day, not one single case exists of the disease being transferred from wild buffalo to one of Montana's prized beef cattle. Not one. Back in 1872, a pair of settlers living in their brand new home on the plains of Kansas, inspired by the contentment they so enjoyed, came up with a folk song just as the great buffalo slaughter was nearing its height. The song touched a nerve and spread far and wide. To this day, the buffalo are still looking for their home on the range, the home they once knew so many years ago.
Oh, give me a home where the buffalo roam, the deer and the antelope play, where seldom is heard a discouraging wind, the skies are not cloudy all day. Home, home on the range, where the deer and the antelope play, seldom is heard a discouraging word, skies are not cloudy all day.